Hey guys, welcome back to Results Junkies podcast. Mr. Singh and I are home for a brief moment as I get ready to sprint to the airport after we're done recording. Bunch of stuff on the radar today. We're going to be talking about who's going public and who's not going public, and the size of the list and how that makes us feel. There's some updates on Google and Gemini that companies definitely need to be aware of. If we get time, there's some interesting articles about Twitter and some lawsuits around advertising, and then also how the EU is handling what we would refer to as unacceptable AI. What a great term. Only the EU could come up with something that sounds so wonderful for something so horrible. Mr. Singh, how the heck are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. You know, we're recording this during a wild week in the public markets and tariffs and all that. But I had an Amazon delivery hit my front doorstep at 4 a.m.
Nice.
And I'm excited about it, but it makes me I just can't help but chuckle. I approved these shark headbands.
Oh dear.
I approved a $500 expense last week to surprise ship these to all of our team members at Strata. So they should be hitting everybody's doorstep. Or actually, by the time this episode goes live, everybody will have these. Our whole mascot internally is a shark. And professionally, we're going to announce that we won a pretty big award. And so everybody's going to wear these things. They just don't know that we won the award. Personally, I'm just wondering, I just can't help but chuckle that at age 43, I don't know how I'm going to explain to my son the business value of this. Anyway, just showed up today and I'm like, wow, okay, we're doing this. I am a professional.
And how many shark headbands can you buy for $500? I'm curious.
I think it was 59.
And I guess it's very topical for the day. That was
only you can segue this cleanly. I love it.
Yeah. So 59 was prior to the de minimis loophole being closed, and then after the de minimis loophole, 500 probably buys you like 13.
That's probably right. Yeah. So actually, I'm a genius because I purchased them before the tariffs started. So you're welcome, team.
I think that's not the word I was going to use, but I think let's take a brief segue into this and just say, because we're going to talk a little bit about it when we talk about IPOs. Well, maybe we'll wait till the IPO. We could talk a little bit about the minimus exception there and what potential it has. I think we're going to start with Google's forced inclusion, a little bit of housekeeping. show@resultsjunkies.com is how you email us with comments, questions, Rotten Tomatoes, all that stuff. He is at Paul Singh on all those social media channels. I am at Pizza in Motion. So yeah, this article will include in the show notes. We talked a little bit about this a few weeks ago about how Google was, actually, I think it was Microsoft at the time. Microsoft was including a number of AI features and then increasing the cost of the bundle that they were selling to customers. And so what this article talks about is that Google is doing something similar, but the issue here, the view this article takes, which I think is an interesting view for companies like yours and mine, is that there are permissions in play here. So it's not just whether you want to use AI and what it might cost your company, but that the default choices seem to allow Google to take advantage of the information that's being shared by your employees or users, unless you disable this sharing permission, which, as the article notes, is pretty difficult. You're effectively allowing them to take this information. And when we say difficult to turn off, as you noted in the article, it says, here are the instructions for how to disable this for your company, we think. So it's still unclear exactly how you disable this.
Yeah, it's an interesting misstep. Let's just take the optimistic route. It's just a misstep. Some product manager didn't think this through and smashed the button to launch it. But yeah, I mean, last week
that is a very optimistic route.
I'm in a good mood today, man, despite what the financial markets are going to do. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's still, the market's open in 20 minutes. So let's get all the optimistic talk out of the way before we get to that part. I think you guys migrated to Google Workspace a while ago. We use Google Workspace at Strata. We use it at, Results Junkies and all that. I think in the context of Strata is where it's a little bit more annoying, is that last week I was kind of opening up some Google Docs or something we were doing internally, and here comes the Google version of Mr. Clippy on the right side that says, hey, congrats, Gemini's been activated. And I'm sitting there thinking oh my gosh, who approved this? And I ping our CTO and I'm like, who hit the button on this? We didn't talk about this. And he's like, great news. Nobody hit the button. I guess
Great
great
news.
news. It's also included free, and Google opted us in. And then I think he went on to say, we don't know how to turn it off, which confirms what this article said
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well. But it is, on a serious note, it's kind of frustrating though, because, on the results junkie side, I suppose, we don't, obviously we prefer privacy and all that, but, I don't worry so much about somebody's like, I don't know, AI sweeping up like, how I talk to a founder. But on the Strata side, it's always possible we're talking about an account, or we're talking about, anyway, we have no idea where the data is going other than some language, some vague language in the updated terms of service that say we're committed to privacy and blah, 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 which we all know seems to be
Committed to privacy.
Yeah, it's like, we commit to privacy. We want to reaffirm our commitment to privacy. I'm like, how about we reaffirm our commitment to announcing product launches and letting us opt in? So anyway, we'll see how it goes. But I hope this is not a sign of times to come. I mean, with the Apple rollout for their AI platforms, you had to opt in, and it was very, very clear you were opting in.
Right.
This is just a little jarring because it was just forced upon everybody. So I hope this is not like the sign of times to come. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and I think the path with which they've gone down is a path we've seen in the past. We talked about this. I should have looked up what episode, but it's probably a year ago, where Google changed the way you opt in and opt out of cookies, and it was through a series of menus in your browser, and you had 10, 12 buttons that you had to shut off. So yeah, this is for lack of a better word, this is on brand for them in terms of how they roll out features, and regardless of how sensitive the feature might be, because I think this is a pretty sensitive one. I think in terms of, they're pulling information out of your company that they have used. And like, I haven't read through the whole TOS to see exactly what they can do with the data, but there's definitely a lot of stuff there that I think most folks wouldn't want just out in the open.
Well, I think there's a little nuance there. I think everybody would agree that to your last point, I think everybody would agree that there could be stuff in your data that you just don't want out there. That I think we can all agree on. What is really murky about this particular feature set is it's unclear how the aggregate data is going to be used in some way. And I don't know how to articulate that well yet. I'm sure somebody else can. But, I'm not trying to switch gears, but just in a related vein, we all know that attribution is kind of messed up for everybody, right? Nobody can really figure out where leads are coming from anymore. Just buyer behaviors change and all that stuff. But what is particularly interesting to me over the last, look at the date here, maybe in the last 45 days or so, is that we've probably seen, I would say, I have the data handy, but just like I'm eyeballing this while we record live, I would say about 10% of Strata's leads, customer leads over the last 30 to 40 days have actually originated with a referral code from ChatGPT. And so
and you can see that.
Like, well, yeah, I can see the referral source being ChatGPT. It's the last click before they actually come over to us and then request a demo. Which, is interesting. I mean, it's nice, don't get me wrong, but I don't exactly know what I know nothing about. We'll talk to these leads to understand what they were doing with ChatGPT as best as we can. But the point here is that from a security standpoint, you're absolutely right. A lot of people may not want their data in there. I agree with that statement. I think the more alarming piece to me though is that all of our data is getting swept up. Like even these like seemingly random Google Docs that are in my Google Drive, maybe your Google Drive and all this stuff. What's more alarming to me is how that aggregate data will be used. Let's just play the optimistic route here, right? Security is good. They're not going to like leak my docs to you and vice versa. That's cool. But I think the bigger, broader question over time is going to be what comes out of all this aggregate data, and how does that get used?
I think that's a fair question, and I think call it somebody who's a little bit more on the privacy side. I think that's something that they should have been more forthright for sure in how they roll this stuff out.
Yeah. Are you, by the way, just as a side note on this topic, I know we've talked about this we've touched on it every couple of weeks. Are you using any AI? I know a couple of weeks ago it was kind of like not really, but
yeah, still not yet. I keep listening to how people are using AI because I want to find the use case. I just, listening to how people are using it. The closest thing I got was, I heard on some podcast about how they were using it to assemble a larger set of data to answer a question, and I thought that was a potentially valuable way to do it. I haven't run into that use case yet. I did see an article somewhere that said that ChatGPT like doubled or tripled subscribers on the B2C product. So clearly, a lot of people are finding this use. I just haven't found enough use that I can't still get there with Google. So just haven't pivoted into something else at this point.
Yeah. I've been still. A couple weeks ago, I installed the ChatGPT Chrome extension, so it sort of routes your if you don't put a URL into the bar, it actually routes the question or the search to ChatGPT. So that's been interesting to try. It's annoyingly slow sometimes, but it is what it is. I will say the two most common usages of AI for me right now is better search in my email. So I use Superhuman email, and so that's been like, find me the latest term sheet from this company, and I can write that in plain English, and it goes back through my email and says, here it is, and shows you the source. And then the other one that I like is in our CRM at Strata. If I want to pop into an opportunity and kind of get a summary of what the conversation's been between our team and a prospect, there's a little summarize button at the top, which is kind of nice. But we'll see. I'm still a bit on the fence. I'm kind of like you in that sense, but I'm willing to tinker a little bit. If you get a chance afterwards, Matt Paulson, our friend from Sioux Falls, posted something on Facebook and LinkedIn the other day of how he uses AI, which I thought was really interesting. He talked about how he uses it for his medical records. He talked about how he uses it to prepare for meetings and things like that. So, which I wanted to put a little snarky comment on there and say, your meeting AI must not be that great because you still take my calls. So, and that's probably going to stop after this episode. So,
well, my snarky comment was going to be that I saw him on Facebook and he was talking about taking his wife to Olive Garden. So I called him to question all other sorts of things. So
great. I hope you did post something there. That's great.
Just going to leave that there. Yeah. Let's pivot into one more topic before we run out of time. Honestly, I think we could talk about this one for a pretty long time. There's just a lot to unpack here, but let's talk about IPOs because I just think this is interesting. Not in terms of any of the specific IPOs, but I think there's one we should talk about in a little detail, but just in terms of the number. So here we are in early February. So far, 3 companies have filed for IPOs in 2025, and there are 2, 4, 6, 8 that were either filed or were thinking about filing in 2024. Looks like 3 or 4 actually filed but still haven't gone public. So, call it 10-ish companies in the mix here. And I think what's amazing about this is that the number is this big because it hasn't been in a while. And I guess the other part that's amazing is that we're impressed that there are, 10 companies that could actually IPO in 2025 because the markets have been just so dry in the IPO world.
Yeah, this again, we're recording this episode early in the week, and the tariffs are going live and all these things are happening, and I think if you kind of think about the broader picture of IPOs and larger M&A, I think I'm feeling less optimistic. I was hoping that 2025 would be when we would start to see some sort of liquidity.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I'm sure people are listening to this and be like, "Oh, woe is me. Sorry, investors, it sucks for you." It's fair to say that, I suppose. But the other side of this is that there are a lot of team members at a lot of these companies that, have deferred a lot of their compensation to be able to work at these places and add a lot of value. And when they get liquidity, it happens to be alongside the investors, whether it happens through M&A and IPO. So I think, my own optimism of what happens in 2025 is maybe dropping a little bit. I think, if we look at sort of this list, and let's just assume this list is accurate, right? The ones that are filed are, I think one of them is a crypto-based platform, and then the other 2 are defense. So, okay. All right. And then you look at the ones that are in the works since 2024, you look at Klarna being a, buy now, pay later kind of platform. Some of these consumers, companies that are on the list, depending on what happens over the next couple of weeks with consumer behavior and stuff, they may end up delaying a little bit further. So I don't know. We'll see. I guess all I'm just trying to say is that this article was actually dated February 1st, which I can't remember the timing of this weekend. It seems like the news is a flurry all the time now. So I don't
Right.
remember exactly when, the tariffs were announced, but it was probably the same day. So poor timing on this one. But the title's so great. It's here's all the IPOs reported to be in the works for 2025, which makes it sound amazing. I'm like, I click through, I'm like, I expect 50 of them on there or something.
And there
it's
are
like,
definitely not
here's
50.
all 3 of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think like one of the ones that's on the list from trying since 2023, and I don't know how to pronounce this correctly, is Shein or Shine, which is this company from Asia, China, I think specifically, which sort of rides along these same rails as Temu, which is another big retailer. And I think Temu really burst onto the scene 2 years ago with a Super Bowl commercial. And these companies use something called the de minimis loophole, where they could ship goods from abroad into the U.S. without significant customs scans or taxes, but as long as the individual purchases were under $800. This law was written decades ago and didn't really fit today's world. And as part of this push into tariffs, the new administration has also closed the de minimis loophole. And so without getting into like deep conversations about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it almost certainly nukes any chance that Shein or Shine has to go public. I mean, it just their business model in the U.S. is, for all intents and purposes, nuked. I don't know how they figure out. I mean, like, you're talking about all of their goods are going to have to go up in price because they'll all have some level of tax they didn't have before. And on top of that, if they have extra time to review packages, that adds to the cost as well, because now you're floating inventory longer, all this stuff.
Right.
So a lot of changes coming there for companies like Shein and Temu. So
yeah, well, I think, and again, I'm just being a little overly selfish here, but I think I'm less optimistic about getting a little bit more liquidity, especially for some companies that we've invested in 7, 8, 9, even 10 years ago. So that's a bummer. But who knows? Maybe as fast as the news changed to the negative here a couple days ago, maybe it'll change to the positive. Who knows?
Well, and let's talk about why that's important. I think so. To your point, you talked about investors and people going, "Oh gosh, we have these investors that can't make money." When you think about the products that have come out of startups that are just some incredible things that are out there in terms of scale, take a company like Uber. I mean, Uber was a startup, and love it or hate it, it's a large part of a lot of people's lives, and so Uber needed to be able to work its way through the private markets to get to public. And there's other companies like Uber behind it. And so the more there's a logjam at the top, folks have to understand this, is that these other smaller companies now can't get their next raise because
that's right.
There's all these companies stuck. And you might have a company that wanted to IPO in 23 or 24 that investors thought they were going to get money back on, that they would then redeploy into the marketplace. And so there's 2 potential deleterious effects here. The first is the obvious, which is the investor doesn't get the money back, so they don't invest it back into the marketplace again, which slows down companies being able to get capital.
Right.
But on top of that, they may invest that capital into another bridge round for these companies that are waiting to go public who may not be profitable. And so they may tie up more cash for longer and or lose something on those final bets, where they don't get the sort of return they were hoping for. One of our companies in our portfolio that, during the pandemic had a valuation of call it like $5 or $6 billion and got written down to like $1.5 billion. Folks who invested when they were closer to $5 or $6 billion, may not see that at any point in the future. So they're tying that money up for 2 or 3 years longer and getting a lower valuation for it. It slows everything else down. And so these exciting companies that are coming up are just, log jammed, if you will. And look, there's money at lower levels. I get to talk a little bit about this, and the CEO has actually said yes, that he'll come on with us. But Devin, who's been one of our more successful founders in the portfolio, who was in the business travel space, you and I talked about this a few weeks ago on the show, they're just getting ready to close, a fairly sizable round. I'll talk more about it in the future. Successful second-time entrepreneur, had a successful exit. Investors definitely want to invest in him again. I think they've got a great product. They got product market fit. If the rest of the pipeline doesn't continue to move towards acquisitions and IPOs at the top levels, I do wonder, once they get deeper into their journey, if they'll be able to raise money when they need to bridge to a capital round or a large acquisition or something like that 5 or 6 years from now.
Yes. Yes to the whole thing. I mean, I don't want to name the company's name that I'm about to mention here without its permission, but you'll know who I'm talking about. One of our, mutual portfolio companies recently was like, and I'm going to change the numbers around a little bit just to
Sure.
obfuscate it, but you'll know who I'm talking about. One of our portfolio companies sent out an email, and I think we'd have invested in their first round probably about 9 months ago now. And their latest investor update came out, and long story short, sounds like they could probably easily raise another 500K, maybe a little bit more on pretty good terms because their performance has been pretty good. And you and I were on a text chain with this founder somehow, and
Yep.
he said, yeah, let me put a plan together and figure out how I'd like spend the money to help it grow and that sort of thing. And my response on that text chain was, I don't think you should do that. I think you should, if you're going to take the extra money in on great terms, I would just extend the runway, and mostly because there's just a lot of uncertainty on what it's going to take to get to the next round.
Sure.
So if you have the ability to get additional money in on fair terms without losing too much hair, that sort of thing, extend the runway. And that's the direct result of what you're talking about, right? If there's less certainty about where that Series A or that Series B is going to come from, then even entrepreneurial companies are going to kind of slow things down and try to just make sure that they stay default alive until there's more confidence in the next fundraise. So much of the growth and the aggressive focus on that growth for these early stage companies is predicated on the potential availability of future capital, and when that's not there, you're going to slow it all down.
Well,
So
let's talk through that a little bit more. Like you talk about the unintended consequences there. If you do slow it down, what that likely means is and I'll just make up fake numbers. If that company was going to spend $50,000 a month on paid advertising to help the company grow, maybe they spend 20,
right,
which obviously, unless they hit lightning in a bottle, will lead to slower growth. So I mean,
right.
all of these things have an effect on how the ecosystem moves, and I think there's certainly a lot of uncertainty right now around a number of these different levers. And I think you bring up a good point with this portfolio company and whether they should extend runway or use that money for marketing. I think they're both valid choices as to which direction you would go, and it's a tough answer because we just don't know what the future looks like.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So who knows? By the time we record next week, we're out of the tariffs, and we're all going to be counting a list of 30 potential IPOs. Who knows? So
I don't. I don't know that I don't know that I see that
I
outcome as
agree.
likely, but yeah, anything's possible.
That's
Yeah, we're
right.
gonna.
Yeah, yeah.
I gotta say, I really love your optimism today,
You ever see that?
Mr. Singh.
I mean, everybody's seen that meme where there's like a dog in the middle of the room, and there's just everything's on fire all around him, and he's like, "This is fine. This is fine." That's how it feels right now.
Oh,
So.
that's funny.
All right, so let's see. After we finish up recording, not to jump off early, but I
Yeah.
don't know what your timing is. You're jumping on a plane to O'Hare and then on to Vegas, but tragically, you're ninth on the upgrade list. You've had to you have fallen from the ranks of global down to the rest of the 1Ks, and I'm just here to tell you that I'll be thinking about you today in
Well,
the back of an airplane. It'll be so tragic.
and interestingly enough, I went like 3 laps with United trying to convince them on something with my global services status because they had my status listed in the system wrong, and they still do. And so there won't be even a challenge attempt to retain global services, which would have been tough for me to hit anyway. So yes, I am in the back of the bus with you, Paul. And I think what's interesting is, like I keep thinking there's going to be a slowdown in business travel, and I've seen little bits and pieces on rate around this, but quite frankly, what I'm looking at, to your point, being ninth on the upgrade list for an afternoon flight on a Monday is as a 1K tells me that we haven't seen that slowdown yet. And so that means that likely throughout the year, there will still be a lot of elite members out there fighting for those seats. What remains to be seen for business travelers is just what we're going to be paying for fares. Because I definitely do see a mixed bag right now. There are times where I see the fares are still sky high, $500-$600 one way to Vegas. And other times where, I'm seeing 300 or 350 one way to Vegas. So, there's definitely a mixed bag out there of business travel. And I think it's going to take some time for us to figure out what the market is going to bear in terms of how much business travel there will be, and whether the likes of you or I will actually have a chance for a cheap upgrade. I'm not even talking about free upgrades with status at this point. I'm talking about the ability to buy the cheap upgrade on the long flight when we need it, because it seems pretty clear to me that waiting for free upgrades right now in United is sort of like waiting for IPOs.
Yeah.
So call it what you will.
Yeah. Except we need one of those more than the other, but that's a different. I won't belabor that.
When you say need, I really want to understand. We should probably dig into that. Maybe on a future episode, we should really dig into what you need versus what I need, because I got to tell you,
that's right.
Spending over 14 total days on airplanes last year, thinking about that amount of time crammed into coach, it's either the upgrades or the chiropractor. It's just one of the two.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Well,
and me not being a big guy, as you well know, that just means that, when there are big dudes on either side of me, they're just be like, oh, this little guy can take a little bit extra shoulder.
You should someday in all your free time, I hope you start like a anonymous Twitter account or something, and you just sort of live tweet your experiences on these airplanes. There was a guy years ago, I'm pretty sure this is, well, I won't mention his name. There used to be an account on Twitter called Startup L Jackson, which was basically like, it was a parody on Samuel L. Jackson and the way he would talk, but it was all about startups and what this guy was hearing. And over the years, when I would like read these tweets, I'm like, yeah, this guy's funny. And then it was like, wait, this guy's like in a lot of the same places that I might be. And then it was like, wait, this guy knows stuff from my office. Turned out it's one of our employees. It turned in, so you should be that guy for travel. That would be funny.
Love it.
So, all right, man. We'll safe travels.
Gotta hit the button ahead of the airport. Enjoy my coach seat.
I love it. Safe travels. I'll talk to you soon.
See you, man.